Good day, I'm Derek Fildebrand, publisher of the Western Standard. In just a few minutes, anytime now, we're going to be going live to an address from Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, where she will be making a statement following a meeting of the Alberta United Conservative Party caucus discussing the place of Alberta within the Canadian Federation. This comes after a huge outburst of activity and support in support of Alberta independence. An announcement from Danielle Smith that she is tabling legislation that will amend the Citizens Initiative referendum legislation that allows Albertans to trigger referendums on their own. Widely expected now that this is setting the stage for a referendum in Alberta on independence and the future of our sovereignty. The United Conservative Party caucus, I think, just finished meeting. UCP MLA Jason Steffen told reporters at the Alberta legislature today that he supports Alberta holding a referendum on independence. The cat is seemingly out of the bag, and we're into uncharted territory here. So we're standing by to hear what Danielle Smith has to say, but we're just going to chit-chat about what's leading to this, what's compelling her statement today, and what we might expect. So I've got joining me here, Western Standard opinion editor Nigel Hannaford.
Hello again, Derek.
Nigel, you and I are both very vexed because the Premier's office did not provide us with an embargoed copy of the speech. For those following at home, you often get budgets or major speeches in advance, so you can write your story or write your opinion column, and then it's released as soon as the Premier starts speaking, that kind of thing. We did not get that today, so you and I are not pretending to be musing about what we're about to hear. We just don't actually know.
No, we don't. There's probably a reason for that, and that Mark Carney has, of course, just arrived in Andrews Air Force Base to meet with Donald Trump. So it's an evolving situation, and it wouldn't surprise me if the speech is still being written, to be honest with you. Generally speaking, these remarks are prepared well in advance, and they do give them to us, and we read them and start writing, and that's why you get commentary almost as soon as the speech is made. That's not the case today, so we're very much waiting to see what the Premier has to say.
Yeah. So okay, let's kind of set the table about what's leading up to here. So Monday last week, the Liberals were reelected, primarily on. Oh, I think we are actually going to Danielle Smith right now. Let's stop talking. Let's listen to what the Premier has to say.
We have fought wars and died defending of our fellow Canadians searching for opportunity, many of whom stay and become Albertan, and many who return home to their native province. All have been welcomed with open arms. Our province has contributed hundreds of billions of dollars more to the federal treasury for use in other parts of the country than we'll ever receive back in benefits. We have allowed this to occur because, quite frankly, we know how blessed our province is with an endowment of natural resources that no other country on earth possesses. And we want all of our friends, families, and fellow Canadians across the country to benefit from it. We don't ask for special treatment or handouts. We just want to be free to develop and export that incredible wealth of resources we have for the benefit of our families and future generations. Free to pursue opportunities with the ideals of entrepreneurship, hard work, and innovation that have become synonymous with the name of our province. Freedom to choose how best to provide healthcare, education, and other needed social services to our people, even if it's done differently than what Ottawa has in mind. Strong and free is more than just our provincial motto. It represents who we are and how we want to live as a people. And that is why Albertans are so frustrated with the direction of our country. For the last 10 years, successive Liberal governments in Ottawa, supported by their new Democrat allies, have unleashed a tidal wave of laws, policies, and political attacks aimed directly at Alberta's free economy, and in effect, against the future and livelihoods of our people. They have blocked new pipelines with C-69, canceled multiple oil and gas projects, and banned the very tanker ships needed to carry those resources to new markets. They have stacked an oil and gas production cap on top of a crippling industrial carbon tax, making new energy and agricultural projects economically impossible to pursue without massive subsidies from governments, which Ottawa has failed to provide and which our taxpayers cannot afford. This onslaught of anti-energy, anti-agriculture, and anti-resource development policies have scared away global investments to the tune of $500 billion, driving those investments and jobs out of Alberta and Canada to much more attractive investment climates in the United States, Asia, and the Middle East. Having traveled much of the world these past few years, it is evident that Canada is not viewed as an attractive place to invest in resource development, manufacturing, or agriculture because of our high carbon taxes, endless red tape, and the uncertainty and chaos brought about by these and other federal government policies. As a result, Canada has fallen to dead last in economic growth among industrialized nations. The world looks at us like we've lost our minds. We have the most abundant and accessible natural resources of any country on earth, and yet we landlock them, sell what we do produce to a single customer to the south of us, while enabling polluting dictatorships to eat our lunch. For Albertans, these attacks on our province by our own federal government have become unbearable. As I said, these policies have cost Albertans roughly $500 billion in investment, and that loss is growing daily. It has and will continue to cost hundreds of thousands of jobs, robbing countless Albertans and other Canadians of their means of providing for their families. It has cost us a decade of opportunities and tens of billions in lost royalties that could have been invested in the health, education, infrastructure, and social services Albertans and Canadians need. And what's worse, Ottawa continues onward with more destructive policies. They have imposed net zero mandates on our natural gas-based power grid, causing investment in reliable generation from natural gas to flee, thereby endangering the future stability of our power grid and risking future blackouts and spikes in electricity costs for Alberta families and businesses. They have attacked our food producers with methane taxes, onerous regulations on fertilizer, electric vehicle mandates, and many other destructive policies that have hiked costs on our farmers and ranchers and driven billions of dollars of investment in agriculture elsewhere. They've interfered in provincial jurisdiction time and again, from taking over the regulation of plastics to mandating how we operate childcare, healthcare, and dental care, to harassing law-abiding firearms owners, to dozens of other examples of unconstitutional interference. And of course, Alberta has fought back. We always have and always will. We passed the Sovereignty Within a United Canada Act and have invoked it twice to protect Albertans as best we can from the effects of the net zero electricity regulations and the energy production cap. We beat the feds in court on both the No New Pipelines Law, C-69, and their attempt to regulate plastics, though they have ignored both court decisions to this point. And we have just announced a court challenge on the net zero electricity regulations and are further preparing to also challenge the energy production cap. We continue to do all in our power to counteract Ottawa's chill on investment in energy, agriculture, and our other job sectors through various tax cuts and incentive programs, which greatly strain the provincial budget. We have fought these attacks from Ottawa furiously and have won some important battles, but the lost opportunities, jobs, and futures of so many Albertans are costly and demoralizing, as are the growing number of Eastern politicians who choose to openly demonize and target Alberta for political gain. That is why a large majority of Albertans are so deeply frustrated with the results of last week's federal election. It's not that our preferred candidate and party lost. That happens in a democracy. It's that the same Liberal government with almost all the same ministers responsible for our nation's inflation, housing, crime, and budget crisis, and that oversaw the attack on our provincial economy for the past 10 years, have been returned to power. Now, as we all know, one thing has changed. We have a new prime minister. And I will say that in my first conversation with him since the election, he had some promising things to say about changing the direction of his government's anti-resource policies. However, Albertans are more of a actions speak louder than words kind of people. So while I will in good faith work with Prime Minister Mark Carney on unwinding the mountain of destructive legislation and policies that have ravaged our provincial and national economies this past decade, until I see tangible proof of real change, Alberta will be taking steps to better protect ourselves from Ottawa. As a start, I will soon appoint a special negotiating team to represent our province in negotiations with the federal government on the following reforms requested by our province. We hope this will result in a binding agreement that Albertans can have confidence in. Call it an Alberta Accord, if you will. First, Alberta requires guaranteed corridor and port access to tidewater off the Pacific, Arctic, and Atlantic coasts for the international export of Alberta oil, gas, critical minerals, and other resources in amounts supported by the free market rather than by the dictates and whims of Ottawa. Every province in the country, other than Alberta and Saskatchewan, have coastal port access, and no province needs it more given the size and value of our resources. This will benefit all Canadians to the tune of trillions of dollars of economic activity, including billions for First Nations partners. Second, the federal government must end all federal interference in the development of provincial resources by repealing the No New Pipelines Law, C-69, the oil tanker ban, the net zero electricity regulations, the oil and gas emissions cap, the net zero vehicle mandate, and any federal law or regulation that purports to regulate industrial carbon emissions, plastics, or the commercial free speech of energy companies. These laws are destroying investment confidence and costing Canada and Alberta hundreds of billions in investments each year. They need to go. Third, the federal government must refrain from imposing export taxes or restrictions on the export of Alberta resources without the consent of the government of Alberta. Frankly, all provinces should be given that same respect for their resources. And fourth, the federal government must provide to Alberta the same per capita federal transfers and equalization as is received by the other three largest provinces, Quebec, Ontario, and British Columbia. We have no issue with Alberta continuing to subsidize smaller provinces with their needs, but there is no excuse for such large and powerful economies like Ontario, Quebec, BC, or Alberta to be subsidizing one another. That was never the intent of equalization, and it needs to end. If these points can be agreed to by the federal government, I am convinced it will not only make Alberta and Canada an infinitely stronger and more prosperous country, but will eliminate the doubts a growing number of Albertans feel about the future of Alberta in Canada. While these negotiations with Ottawa are ongoing, our government will appoint, and I will chair, the Alberta Next panel. This panel will be composed of some of our best and brightest judicial, academic, and economic minds to join with me in a series of in-person and online town halls to discuss Alberta's future in Canada, and specifically, what next steps we can take as a province to better protect Alberta from any current or future hostile policies of the federal government. Details of the membership and scope of that panel will be released in the coming weeks. After the work of the panel is finished, it is likely we will place some of the more popular ideas discussed with the panel to a provincial referendum so that all Albertans can vote on them sometime in 2026. To be clear from the outset, our government will not be putting a vote on separation from Canada on the referendum ballot. However, if there is a successful citizen-led referendum petition that is able to gather the requisite number of signatures requesting such a question to be put on a referendum, our government will respect the democratic process and include that question on the 2026 provincial referendum ballot as well. I also want to state unequivocally that as Premier, I'm entirely committed to protecting, upholding, and honoring the inherent rights of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Therefore, any citizen-initiated referendum question must not violate the constitutional rights of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and must uphold and honor Treaties 6, 7, and 8, should any referendum question ever pass. This is non-negotiable. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, that being separation. We are well aware that there is a large and growing number of Albertans that have lost hope in Alberta having a free and prosperous future as a part of Canada. Many of these Albertans are organizing petitions to trigger a citizen-initiated referendum, as I mentioned earlier. The vast majority of these individuals are not fringe voices to be marginalized or vilified. They are loyal Albertans. They are quite literally our friends and neighbors who've just had enough of having their livelihoods and prosperity attacked by a hostile federal government. They're frustrated, and they have every reason to be. I want to talk directly to those Albertans. I know how frustrated so many of you have become with our country and the feeling of having politicians living thousands of miles away, passing laws and rules that have cost you your loved ones, jobs, careers, dreams, and opportunities for a brighter future. As most Albertans know, I have repeatedly stated I do not support Alberta separating from Canada. I personally still have hope that there is a path forward for a strong and sovereign Alberta within a united Canada. And let me explain a few reasons why. First, Alberta already has and can continue to use the Alberta Sovereignty within a United Canada Act and other measures to fight through much of Ottawa's damaging interference and prosper in spite of it. We will also continue our successful battles against these unconstitutional and damaging policies in both the courts of law and public opinion. And there is more to be hopeful for. This past election demonstrated that attitudes across the country, especially among young people, are changing with respect to understanding the importance of free markets and the development of our natural resources. People are pushing back against government censorship and cancel culture. More and more Canadians understand that in order for Canada to play a role in ending conflict and poverty at home and abroad, our country must become strong again. And we can only do that by becoming an energy and economic superpower using the vast and unmatched energy, mineral resources, and fertile lands of our country. 85% of Canadians in this last election voted for the two leaders promising to turn Canada into an energy superpower and to build resource corridors, including for oil and gas, while only 13% voted for the fringe voices in the Socialist NDP and Bloc parties and their extremist leave-it-in-the-ground policies. Obviously, we have a ways to go, and it will take a lot of work to undo the damage caused by these last 10 years of Liberal NDP rule. But that clear change in public opinion gives me hope. I think it should give all Albertans hope. Now, none of us knows what the future holds should Ottawa, for whatever reason, continue to attack our province, as they have done over the last decade. Ultimately, that will be for Albertans to decide, and I will accept their judgment. But I am going to do everything within my power to negotiate a fair deal for Alberta with the new Prime Minister. And while doing so, our government will work with Albertans on various initiatives to better protect Alberta's provincial sovereignty and economy from Ottawa should those negotiations fail and the economic attacks continue. Alberta didn't start this fight, but rest assured we will finish it and come out of it stronger and more prosperous than ever. In closing, I want Albertans to know how important it will be in the coming months for our province to be steadfast, unified, and to refrain from heeding the voices of those seeking to divide Albertans against one another. There will be many outside and even inside this province who will try and sow fear and anger among us. They will seek to divide us into different camps for the purposes of marginalizing and vilifying one another based on differing opinions, effectively pitting neighbor against neighbor and Albertan against Albertan. This is not the Alberta way. It's not who we are, and it's not who I am. There are thousands of Albertans who are so frustrated with the last 10 years of Ottawa's attacks on their friends and families' livelihoods that they feel Alberta would be stronger and more prosperous as an independent nation. That is an understandable and justifiable feeling to have, even if we disagree on what to do about it. These Albertans are not traitors, nor should they ever be treated as such. They just love their province and family and want a better future than the one Ottawa is offering them right now. There are also thousands of Albertans that are so attached and loyal to their identity as Canadians that there is nothing Ottawa has done to our province that would justify Alberta leaving Canada. It's not that they think everything is perfect or that we've been treated fairly. They just believe being part of Canada despite those problems has much more value than leaving. These individuals are also loyal Albertans and should never be accused of being anything less. And then there are hundreds of thousands of Albertans that probably feel a lot like I do, that are deeply frustrated with the way our province has been mistreated and damaged by successive federal Liberal governments, and are not willing to tolerate the status quo any longer. But these Albertans still believe there is a viable path to a strong, free, and sovereign Alberta, empowered to succeed and prosper within a united Canada. A Canada where the federal government actually honors the Constitution, upholds provincial rights, and empowers provinces to pursue their unique potentials as their people so choose. Regardless of what each of us believes about this issue or what path we think is best, we as Albertans must be able to respectfully debate and discuss these issues with our friends, family members, and neighbors. I know that if we do that, in the end, our province will find the best solution for this immense challenge we face and come out of it stronger and more free than ever. I'll always put my faith in Albertans to find the right path. I trust you. May our beautiful Alberta always remain forever strong and free.
All right, that was Alberta Premier Danielle Smith addressing the people of Alberta in a very interesting and increasingly turbulent time, Nigel. I mean, she had her 4 demands: guaranteed resource export corridors to port access on both coasts, ending all anti-resource legislation imposed by the Liberal government that is in power now. And there's a long list of those bills, and we'll go through every single one. No export taxes without Alberta's consent. And that Alberta, this one's a bit oddly worded, but that Alberta gets essentially the same equalization treatment as Ontario, BC, and Quebec.
That's the new one.
Yeah, it's not getting rid of equalization, but it's essentially saying, okay, fine, equalization only for the small maritime provinces and Manitoba, but essentially no more Quebec. If Quebec gets something, we get something.
Well, that first 3 of those is actually a condensation of the original 9 demands that she presented to Mr. Carney, I think before he was even elected as Prime Minister. And,
he had been elected Prime Minister, but hadn't gone through. He'd been selected by the party as Prime Minister.
He'd been selected by the party, but not yet elected quite. So anyway, he was, at any rate, she's already put that to him, and I think just for rhetorical purposes.
She brought it to 4.
Yeah. So
she's going to appoint a team of negotiators to deal with Ottawa and commission the Alberta Next panel chaired by herself. We'll see how different or not that is from Jason Kenney's Fair Deal panel, which was not chaired by himself. But I think this will be a bit more of an involved process with the Premier.
I think the difference between those 2 panels is I mean, maybe I'm just a little too pro Danielle, but I have a sense that she is more committed to that panel to do what it set out to do, rather than just be a staller while, hope somehow something turns up. So I think she actually does mean to make that work.
Yeah, I was there when Jason Kenney announced his Fair Deal panel. It was a Canada Strong and Free Regional Alberta Conference where he announced it. And I had written at that time that this was a relief valve because the independence movement was picking up steam then. Yeah. Quite a bit, maybe not as seriously and as well organized and led as it is right now. But I saw it as a relief valve, and that's exactly what it was. Not very much came from it. A few things moved in the right directions, but kind of just let off the steam. So maybe we'll talk about those things before we get to the stuff directly on the independence front, which she spent, I'm going to approximate more than half her address talking about.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does she think there's actually... She said she's encouraged by her first meeting with Mark Carney, but she wants actions, not words. I don't know. Is she saying this to be polite, give the guy a chance, or do you think she honestly thinks he's not going to deliver, and she just has to be diplomatic up front here?
I don't think that you, as the Premier of Alberta, can go out there a week after the election and say, I just don't trust this guy and we're going to go and do whatever we want to do. He has made some moves, rhetorically speaking, in her direction. Not that it's a provincial thing particularly, but he has also suggested that he'll move up the by-election date to accommodate Mr. Poilievre. That would seem to be that will be taken as a conciliatory move by most of the country. And therefore, if she had come out with guns blazing and say, this is it, we're a Liberal government, we're all doomed, so we're gonna build a stockade and man it, that would not have gone over well in Alberta or the rest of the country. Mr. Carney has made certain, I won't call them promises, but suggestions as to how he might move his position on things that are important to us. She's going to give him a chance to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know whether she's going to give him 6 months or a year. We're talking about events in 2026. And to be fair to Mr. Carney, which I personally find very hard, but nevertheless, to be fair to Mr. Carney, you're in government, it's going to take a while to do things the Canadian way. You can't be like President Trump making executive orders, doing this, and this.
No. Mark Carney created the executive order. Remember,
Well,
he signed a piece of paper getting rid of the carbon tax.
That's easy. Just just make a paper commitment, sign a piece of paper saying we're going to build pipelines and watch the court cases stand.
Yeah.
So no, he's going to need time to give some evidence that he is in working in good faith. If he's not, well, then things happen. People will buy that.
So she's going to chair this so-called Alberta Next panel.
Yes.
She says some of the more popular ideas from it are going to be put in a referendum by the government in 2026. That seems to be held, she acknowledged, in likely conjunction with an independence referendum. That referendum will not be called by the Alberta government. It will instead be in all probability, be triggered by a citizens' initiative referendum. They're amending the legislation to make it actually possible to use that legislation.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to make it easy, but they're taking it from impossible to difficult. And I think the momentum is clearly there to achieve that difficult.
Well, and I think it needs to be in that order of not impossible but difficult, because this is not something that you want to play around with.
No.
I mean, sovereignty, independence, separation, whatever you want to call it. You don't play with that. That would be like going to sea for no other reason than to make yourself sick.
Yeah.
So,
referendums in general, I don't think we should just have willy-nilly. There should be a fairly high bar to achieve them. They just shouldn't be effectively impossible as they are. And she had some words. In marked contrast to former Premier Jason Kenney, who's been increasingly vocal on the CBC and on X, Twitter. He's just saying these are traitors. She said specifically, Albertans who want independence are not traitors. The way they feel and why they want out to be their own independent country is understandable. They are not fringe voices. She said, on the other hand, some Albertans are so wedded to Ottawa and their Canadian identity that there is nothing Ottawa could ever potentially do that would move them off of that, and that those people are also equally Albertan. So trying to be a bit of King Solomon balancing act here. I did notice, though, that she said, and then hundreds of thousands of Albertans are like me, in the middle, who want a sovereign Alberta within Canada. I took the implication from that is that's where she wants to fight. But the implication was she was not a part of the second group, which is the unconditional federalists, for whom there is absolutely nothing that could ever move them towards independence.
It was very carefully worded, but I think you're drawing the correct conclusion from that. The language is interesting. A sovereign Alberta within a united Canada, that is the old Harper language for Quebec's status within Confederation. It's not the Quebec language, of course.
No.
But I think a lot of people would say, well, the problem that we have is not just the money, it's the values that animate the Liberal Party in particular, and therefore which characterize the law that comes out of Parliament, which is not just anti-Alberta, but it's not even in the spirit of Alberta. We think differently to the way they do. So let us be us. If you want to let Quebec be Quebec, Fine. Well, let Alberta be Alberta. So, therefore, a sovereign Alberta within a united Canada makes sense. Reasonable people, and she is reasonable. Reasonable people
Well, if you
can hold
believe
that view.
if you believe it can be achieved, as our editorial put it the day after the election, and the West wants out. Many of us have come to the point of independence because we do not believe substantive reform of the Federation is possible. I would note
She
did not.
can't say that, though, even if she thinks it, which I don't know that she does, but even if she thinks
I
that.
really hope she doesn't think that because
She could come right out and say, well, look, that's it. I'm now your independence premier.
Yeah. But I would note in her 4 demands there was nothing constitutional in there, and a lot of the structural issues around fairness and equality for Alberta and Saskatchewan and Confederation are constitutional. We have a vastly greater population than the Atlantic provinces, yet our vote counts for only 55% of a single Atlantic vote. In the Senate, it's something like each one of their body. I shouldn't say vote for the Senate because there is no votes for the Senate, as Ottawa is at least concerned. But in terms of bodies per senator, it's something like 10 to 1. Alberta's twice the population of all 4 Atlantic provinces, and we have just a hair over half the senators of just New Brunswick or just Nova Scotia. Yet we're many times the population of both combined. She didn't make any constitutional demands. I think a lot of people would recognize that as instantly impossible because then Quebec comes to the table with all its litany of issues. But I, honest to God, do not think that there is a resolution to the Alberta question or the Western question without constitutional reform, and she did not put them on the table. If she wanted no deal, if she wanted to be able to say, hey, we tried and failed, she would put constitutional reform on the table. She did not put constitutional reform on the table. All of these demands are quite achievable with enough political will from the Carney Liberal government.
Maybe. So far, as you were saying, there's no constitutional demands. I wouldn't have been, if I had been advising her, I wouldn't have said, come up with a bunch of constitutional demands. The first one is to get the government of Canada to respect the Constitution that we have. And as she pointed out, when some of their legislation, in particular the No Pipelines Act, but also the, it's not a big deal, but the plastic straws, there's a certain mentality that went with that. Those things have been found to be unconstitutional, and the government of Canada has not acted on those. So, let's start with getting action on the things that we can theoretically do under the Constitution, and then perhaps work on the Constitution in the future.
So this came right out of a caucus meeting of the United Conservative Party. We've been watching this. I haven't seen what's come since, but at least one MLA, Jason Steppen, MLA for Red Deer North, I believe, or South, one of the Red Deer ridings.
Yes, South.
Okay, he's come out and I think more or less declared himself for independence. I would be shocked if there are not others, many more behind closed doors, but I think politically many are afraid still to speak out. Politicians with longevity are afraid to be the tip of the spear on this kind of thing.
Oh, Mr. Stefan just said that he was in favor of a referendum. I'm sure he just is actually vastly against separation and wants the matter cleared altogether.
Yeah, trying to thread the needle
Yeah,
a little bit.
That's
Jason, if you're watching, I mean, would you say you're for a vote on it? I mean, you wouldn't be in favor of a vote on it unless you were for it. Shit, get off the pot. I appreciate you stepping up. It's more bold than others, but you may as well just come out for it and then fight for that. It's populism needs to be listening to the people, but it is also showing leadership, trying to show leadership and bring the people to where you believe in your heart they need to go.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the balance of direct democracy and representative democracy. And our representatives should show some leadership. And the people have the right to reject that leadership every 4 years. I think there was some political objectives in this. We're going to wrap it up soon. I know you have to part, but there's always been a constellation of independence or quasi-independence parties to the right flank of the Conservative Party in Alberta. They've most of the time not been particularly successful, as I know, but it seems the time for the movement has come. And I think what Smith is trying to achieve is now that movement is very much mainstreaming and becoming an issue on which conservative voters in Alberta don't just say they support it, but might actually potentially change their vote for party based upon it. She's trying to make sure that movement stays within the UCP tent without declaring the UCP to be an explicitly independence supporting party, so as to keep the Federalists in the tent and the people who are, perhaps for lack of a better term, call them conditional Federalists, people who might go at some point. I'm not sure how. I know the caucus is divided on this issue. How sharply it's divided, we're gonna have to. The coming days will tell. How well a job do you think she did? Both, I guess there's three parts here in trying to thread the needle on this issue. One with caucus, two with party members, and three with UCP voters. As three somewhat distinct but overlapping blocks.
Well, I wouldn't have counseled her to say anything different to what she said. How well it works is another matter. But what I took from her remarks was that, first of all, she's saying, look, we've told the federal government, we've told Mark Carney what Alberta needs and wants. We'll give them a chance to deliver on that. Secondly, all the little the Burks, little platoons, all the people that you've just been talking about are out there thinking, well, this is the moment now, we've got to get organized, and there are lots of them, and they are not united, and left alone, they will just collapse and nothing will happen. She has told them to just cool their jets, that there is going to be a process. It'll take there will be a panel, there will be discussions with the government. We will see how the things go, and then there might be a referendum. And if they wait a year for a referendum, or how long it takes, and I'm saying there will be a referendum on the assumption, which I know you share, that if the government doesn't do it, somebody will bring it forward, and we'll meet that. They will get the 300,000 signatures that are needed. Okay, so at that point, everybody's had a chance to think. The leaders have had a chance to emerge, and what will happen, but at least it won't be a total stramash with everything, with people running in different directions and claiming to be the new leader. It could be extremely damaging. You think that Carney's policies and Trudeau's policies are bad for investment? Try a bunch of people making wild statements and promising and taking up arms. Oh God, it just goes on and on and on. Not good.
All right. Well, the one certainty I think we do have right now in all of this is Albertans are going to have a vote on independence in 2026. It is happening. I think, barring some startling chain of events like Smith being overthrown in an internal party coup or something, the Citizens Initiative legislation is going to be amended to from an impossible bar to a high bar. The independence movement is going to meet that high bar, and in 2026, Albertans are going to have a referendum. Smith is in a perilous political position here, trying to allow for that within the UCP's tent, while not forcing an exodus on the other side of the unconditional Federalists, or at least some of the conditional Federalists.
She's got to win on that one, because if there is a palace coup that brings her down, one side or the other
will leave the party,
and then you're back to the NDP. So she has to win on this one.
Yeah, it's
very sensitive.
We are entering. I thought I lived through the most interesting time in Alberta politics with Smith. When she had joined the Progressive Conservatives and the Wild Rose was blown up and then reborn, and then the NDP came in. I thought I was through the most interesting time. I think I might end up being wrong about that. I think right now we're entering potentially the most interesting time in the history of Alberta, and potentially Saskatchewan alongside us as we enter this.
I think you're right.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap it there. I'm sure you're all sick of us. Thank you very much for joining us today. Remember, go to westernstandard.news, click on subscribe, membership of the Western Standard, and access past the paywall is only $10 a month or $100 a year. Thank you very much for joining us today. And God bless the West.